Story 1 of 8. Major fire at Viva Energy's Geelong oil refinery disrupts Australia's fuel supply. Major fire at Viva Energy's Geelong oil refinery disrupts Australia's fuel supply. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The fire at Viva Energy's Geelong refinery broke out on April 15, 2026, around 11:05 p.m. local time, after multiple explosions and flames were reported. The refinery supplies 50% of Victoria's fuel and 10% of Australia's total fuel supply, with a capacity to process up to 120,000 barrels of oil per day. The fire was contained to a 30 by 30 meter area and took over 12 hours to extinguish, finally being declared under control at around 12:04 p.m. on April 16, 2026. The fire was caused by an equipment failure in the motor gasoline section of the refinery, involving a leak of liquid hydrocarbons and gases. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Energy Minister Chris Bowen visited the refinery on April 16, 2026, to assess the situation and assure the public of minimal disruption. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and News.com.au suggest the fire could lead to a short-term price spike of up to 20 cents per litre, while ABC and Viva Energy state there will be no immediate impact on fuel prices for consumers. The Guardian and News.com.au imply the fire could push Australia into Stage 3 of the National Fuel Security Plan, but Anthony Albanese explicitly stated the fire would not trigger any changes to the plan. Some sources, like The Guardian, suggest the fire could have long-term implications for Australia's fuel security, while Viva Energy's CEO Scott Wyatt insists the fire will not cause long-term damage to output. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, News.com.au, SBS News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Story 2 of 8. Defamation trial, Rebel Wilson vs Charlotte MacInnes over bath incident and career claims. Defamation trial, Rebel Wilson vs Charlotte MacInnes over bath incident and career claims. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Charlotte MacInnes is suing Rebel Wilson for defamation over Instagram posts claiming she made a sexual harassment complaint against producer Amanda Ghost and later retracted it for career benefits. The central incident occurred on September 5, 2023, at a Bondi penthouse where Amanda Ghost had a medical reaction to cold water after swimming with MacInnes, leading to both women sharing a bath in swimwear. Rebel Wilson claims MacInnes told her the next day, September 6, 2023, that the bath incident made her feel uncomfortable, but MacInnes denies ever making such a complaint. MacInnes was living with Ghost and her assistant at a rented Bondi penthouse during rehearsals for The Deb in 2023. Wilson posted Instagram stories between September 2024 and July 2025 accusing MacInnes of retracting the alleged complaint for career opportunities, including a lead role in Gatsby, An American Myth and a record deal with Atlantic Records. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian and ABC report Wilson's PR team called her fucking nuts, but Wilson's legal team denies any involvement in the websites, claiming she never asked anyone to publish the content. MacInnes and Ghost disagree on who entered the bath first. MacInnes says she got in first, while Ghost says she got in the shower first and MacInnes suggested the bath. Wilson claims MacInnes told her the bath made her feel uncomfortable, but MacInnes insists she only described it as strange or bizarre and never made a complaint. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, News.com.au and Sydney Morning Herald. Story 3 of 8. Donald Trump nominates David Brat as U.S. Ambassador to Australia after 15-month vacancy. Donald Trump nominates David Brat as U.S. Ambassador to Australia after 15-month vacancy. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump nominated David Brat as the new U.S. Ambassador to Australia. The vacancy in the U.S. Ambassador to Australia position lasted 15 months. Caroline Kennedy served as the U.S. Ambassador to Australia until late 2024, when she left following Trump's election victory. David Brat was a former Republican congressman representing Virginia's 7th District from 2014 to 2018. Brat's nomination requires confirmation by the U.S. Senate before he can take up the posting. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the vacancy lasted 17 months, while SBS, Newscamau, and The Guardian also state it lasted 15 months. Guardian's 17-month claim is inconsistent with other sources. Newscamau and The Guardian both mention a 15-month vacancy, but The Guardian also notes a 17-month figure in the headline, creating ambiguity. This story was covered by The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Story 4 of 8. EU sanctions Russia, funds Ukraine, China retaliates amid economic strain on Russia. EU sanctions Russia, funds Ukraine, China retaliates amid economic strain on Russia. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The EU approved a €90 billion, $147.5 billion, loan to Ukraine, primarily for defense spending, to be delivered over 2 years. The EU imposed its 20th round of sanctions on Russia, listing 120 additional individuals and entities, including 27 Chinese mainland and Hong Kong entities accused of aiding sanctions evasion. China retaliated by placing European defense and aerospace companies on its export control list, blocking access to dual-use items from China within 24 hours of the EU sanctions. Russia's economy shrank by 1.8% in the first 2 months of 2026, prompting the central bank to cut its policy rate for the 8th time in under a year. Viktor Orban's election loss and the reopening of the Druzhba oil pipeline from Russia to Eastern Europe removed Hungary's block on EU aid to Ukraine. But not all outlets told the same story. The articles are identical in content and do not contain any contradictions. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Story 5 of 8. Review of Turkish Airlines business class on Istanbul-Sydney route via Kuala Lumpur. Review of Turkish Airlines business class on Istanbul-Sydney route via Kuala Lumpur. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Flight TK-174 operates daily from Istanbul to Sydney via Kuala Lumpur on an Airbus A350-900 with a total flight time of 20 hours 15 minutes, including the Malaysia stop. The business class seat, 2A, aisle, has a pitch of 44 inches 111 centimeters and a width of 20 inches 50.8 centimeters with direct aisle access but limited footwell space for size 11 feet. Passengers can bring up to 40 kilograms of checked baggage, 50 kilograms on business prime fares, and 20 kilograms of cabin baggage, split as 2 8 kilograms bags plus a 4 kilograms personal item. Turkish Airlines loyalty scheme is Miles and Smiles, part of the Star Alliance, and reward flights can be booked via partners like Singapore Airlines KrisFlyer. The flight was delayed by 75 minutes upon arrival in Sydney due to strong winds, despite being on time for the first sector. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Story 6 of 8. Northern Beaches e-bike hit-and-run incident and related illegal e-bike activity in Sydney. Northern Beaches e-bike hit-and-run incident and related illegal e-bike activity in Sydney. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 38-year-old man was charged with driving furiously and causing bodily harm, negligent driving, and driving while his licence application was refused after allegedly hitting a 15-year-old e-bike rider in North Curl on April 28, 2026. The incident occurred at the intersection of Abbott Road and Pitt Road in North Curl, with police called just after 4:30 p.m. on Monday, April 28, 2026. The 15-year-old boy was airlifted to Sydney Children's Hospital in Randwick with serious leg injuries and remains in a serious but stable condition as of April 29, 2026. The driver was arrested at DY Police Station at 5:30 p.m. on April 28, 2026, and granted strict conditional bail to appear in Manly Local Court on May 20, 2026. Witnesses reported the driver made an offensive hand gesture toward a group of teenage e-bike riders before driving away, and the 15-year-old boy allegedly argued with the driver before the collision. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by news.com.au and Sydney Morning Herald. Story 7 of 8. Rock climber dies after fall at organ pipes, Mount Arapiles, Victoria. Rock climber dies after fall at organ pipes, Mount Arapiles, Victoria. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 24-year-old woman from New South Wales died in hospital after falling at organ pipes near Mount Arapiles on Monday, April 28, 2026, around 11:30 a.m. Emergency services including SES volunteers, paramedics, and Air Ambulance Victoria conducted a high-angle rescue, winching the climber to a nearby paddock for over an hour of advanced life support treatment. The climber was flown to the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne with critical upper body injuries and died overnight. Horsham Police Acting Senior Sergeant Dale McIver, ABC, Dave McIver, Newscamau, confirmed the death and stated a coronial investigation would follow, declining further details. The fall occurred at Organ Pipes, a popular climbing site near Mount Arapiles, described as a trad climbing area with hooks and grips placed in the rock face. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 3, ABC, April 27, reports the climber was in a critical condition but alive, while Articles 1 and 2, ABC and Newscamau, April 28, confirm her death overnight. Article 1, ABC, and Article 2, Newscamau, use slightly different names for the police officer, Dale McIver, ABC, versus Dave McIver, Newscamau. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Story 8 of 8. Australia proposes new laws to force Meta, TikTok, Google to pay news publishers. Australia proposes new laws to force Meta, TikTok, Google to pay news publishers. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The draft legislation is called the News Bargaining Incentive, NBI, and aims to replace the News Media Bargaining Code, NMBC. The proposed levy requires digital platforms to pay 2.25% of Australian revenue to news publishers, offset by 150% for deals with traditional media and 170% for deals with smaller media organisations. The legislation will be introduced to Parliament during the winter sitting period, July or August 2026. Meta previously ended deals worth about $70 million to compensate for news content on Facebook and Instagram. The government engaged in extensive consultation with Meta, TikTok, and Google before releasing the draft legislation. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states that the NBI model replaces the Morrison government's News Media Bargaining Code, NMBC, which Labour says is no longer effective, while Newscamau does not explicitly state this replacement context. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au.